Welcome to part 2 of No Place for Old Trees. It's a presentation for decision makers in Seattle, and I suppose other places as well, about the urban forest as it faces density. It is supported by a grant from the Department of Natural Resources and funded by the USDA Forest Service, which is an equal opportunity employer. They want you to know that they funded this fabulous presentation. In part 1, we went over several items. This part is going to go over what keeps us from having more green space. There are misperceptions, there's incomplete accounting, and there's a way that we lose the green space that we need to understand. When you look across Seattle, you see a lot of trees, and those trees are borrowed from landscapes far away. That's why it looks green. We think we have a lot of trees. That's one of the misperceptions. But if you look straight down on Seattle, you don't get to borrow all those trees. Here's a picture that was taken during the Super Bowl, the one that we won, that day from an airplane looking, or a satellite looking down. You can see that we don't have as many trees as we think we do. We are borrowing a lot of the trees from nearby areas, specifically San Juan, the islands, and also Mercer Island, which are the two most rapidly developing areas in the Pacific Northwest, and they're losing habitat the fastest. So we may not have those trees to look at much longer, at least not as many trees. So Seattle doesn't have a lot of green. We have an average amount of green, an average amount of tree canopy, an average amount of open space. What I do know is we're losing a lot of that open space because it's private open space on single family zones, and those are being taken up by the building boom. The first part of this slideshow went over where we're losing trees. That's the single family zone, and that's the biggest zone where we're losing the most trees. How we're losing them? We're losing them to larger homes, detached dwelling units, building in what were once unbuildable lots, and the land that was once available for trees is now covered in concrete. And also that there's a false dichotomy. There's a feeling about town that you can either have density, lots of people, like we're supposed to have, or you can have green space, and that they are in opposition. That's not necessarily true. You can always add housing by going up. You can always meet your density goals by building higher, but surrounding them with green spaces, which can only be on the ground. And we also went over the fact that tree preservation is actually land preservation. You need a certain amount of land to carry a certain number of trees. You can't just keep adding 2 for 1 because you run out of the land to plant them in and expect that to give you the tree cover you need. And also there's a perception that trees and tree planting projects, urban forestry projects, costs the city money and we can't afford to spend it on them. But having trees, because of their utility values, saves the city and the people of the city money. It's not an expense, it's on the plus side of the books. We went over that last time in part 1. So these are the myths, the misperceptions which we have dispelled. There's a couple other reasons we don't have as much green as we should. And one of those is the belief that you can't tell people what to do on their own property. This has to do with heritage tree protections and protections during building for trees and permits to remove your own trees. People really bridle at that. Although there's plenty of states, cities, and counties that do have tree protection ordinance. And I always hear from the official or the individual, and including me at some time, I say, well, you can't tell people what to do on their own property. And another misperception is that the green infrastructure is going to be able to replace all the environmental benefits of trees. And by green infrastructure, the new green infrastructure, I'm talking about things like bioswales and green roofs and cisterns and things like that. So what about this? You can't tell people what to do on their own property. Makes logical sense to me. We do tell people what they can do with on their own private property and their own private lives. For example, 2 things that got my goat originally was when they told us that we could no longer throw our banana peels in the garbage. We had to take it and put it in a compost bin and take that out at a different day than we take the other stuff out, and it was kind of a pain in the butt. And besides, I was always used to putting it in the garbage. And another thing that made me bridle, and my husband especially, was that you couldn't get a free plastic bag anymore at your grocery store, and that there was going to be a bag ban. And you know, it just kind of rubs people the wrong way. I want a bag, and you know, if I want to be good, I'll bring in my cloth bag and get my groceries in that. But that changed, and we actually got those two things through that seemed very intrusive, and it was done in this manner. They were shown, the public and the decision makers were shown how it impacts the larger community, not just the person in their own home. The banana peels, well, you add that to your garbage disposal and your bills go up hugely because you're throwing away all this perfectly good stuff that could be turned into soil and sold back to us. And so when you could point that out in fiscal terms and in community terms, that made more sense. Same way with the plastic bag ban. People think it's a personal choice whether you want to use plastic. They have all kinds of reasons. I'm going to reuse it, whatever, it's my choice. But here's a wonderful slide from a fellow that took out 60,000 plastic bags and lined them up and took a picture of it.
That's the number of how many are thrown away every 5 seconds in the United States.
And then you could zoom in and see see the bags themselves. And you realize what an incredible amount of waste that is of resources to make the bags, to get rid of the bags. And that helped change the decision makers' minds. And of course, when you see the environmental damage, first time you see a duck with a plastic bag stuck on its head, you go, okay, I'll use paper or cloth. So these things changed and were intrusive. We tell people what they can do on their property all the time. I can't wire my house any way I want. I can't make loud noise. I can't use a jackhammer all night. I can't have a pig farm in Laurelhurst. There's lots of things I can't do. And we as a community are affected by what happens on individuals' property. And we as a community decide that's not how we want it, and we pass some laws. So what's missing is the concept that what you do with your private tree, whether you keep it up or take it down or plant a new one, actually affects the larger community. It affects us with our water quality, with our air, with our pollution, with the cooling of the city, all those good things that we expect trees to do. And so public outreach needs to have that message if we're ever going to have protection for trees on private property. Second reason we don't keep trees in new developments is that there's belief that using the new green infrastructures, and I'll tell you what that is, can replace trees and open space for what they used to do for us. The new green infrastructures are things like bioswales, green roofs, cisterns, rain barrels, permeable pavement. All these things deal with conservation of energy. They will, a green roof will keep a building cooler by reflecting the heat rather than absorbing it. And a bioswale will collect the water, storm water, before it runs down the street, floods the street, and into the water systems and pollutes Puget Sound. So when a developer has a choice between adding a bioswale or keeping a large amount of land and trees to meet their stormwater requirements, they will do a cost comparison. And the bioswale will win, and that's what will be put in. And so there goes the problem, is we judge urban forests on single values rather than the multiple values and benefits they have. I did a little illustration here of Atlas. He's the guy that carried the earth, the world on his shoulders. And here we have an atlas that stands for bioswales. And he's carrying some public good. We were going to call those balls, but we've decided to call them globes. So Atlas is carrying a globe of good, public good, and that's handling the stormwater. If you compare that to the atlas that stands for the urban forest, well, in the same amount of land, the urban forest can only do a little bit of stormwater retention, nothing compared to the bioswale. So the government agency that's in charge of this, which would be Seattle Public Utilities, and the developers who are developing, and the planners who are planning, will tend to spend the money and go for the bioswale. But what it doesn't include is the multiple benefits of that urban forest. Here's a list, it doesn't even really matter, but of the good things that bioswales do. But if you look at the list of the good things that urban forests do, it's a much, much longer list. But we budget in silos. So SPU, when it's writing its budget, will not spend money on urban forest programs. It will spend money on bioswale programs. And you run that through all the various different departments, and then you combine all those budgets. What's left out is urban forest because it's only been compared single benefit at a time. So here's an example. This is kind of another long slide of all the various atlases and all the various programs that support it. For example, down on the lower corner we have environmental education. Why you could hire teachers and have a program and spend money at your school to teach kids about the values of trees and nature. Or you could have them go play in a local park, which also teaches them the values of nature's firsthand. You could use that same bit of land to help keep people healthy, because people walk more and have lower heart disease when they have green space nearby. But another way to do that is the Health Services Department would do a campaign on heart-healthy eating and walking and why you should do those things. So that's a different department spending different money to do the same thing. Another department would be, say, highway noise. That's the Department of Transportation. And in their budget, they want to mitigate the sound, noise pollution that the roads make. So they will spend money to put up those concrete barriers, whereas a patch of trees will mitigate the sound. Each one of these goods has to be bought by each individual department, whereas you only have to buy the urban forest one time. So it's really a matter of which one is doing the more good. I wonder if that makes any sense. Hopefully the graphics will help. The urban forest does a little bit of good, but through a lot of different departments and a lot of disparate ways, whereas the bioswale only does one large bit of good one way. That's not how we budget. We budget one item at a time, and then we piece it together. And besides, if you have a bioswale, where are people going to go for their exercise and kids going to play? I mean, we can't play tag here. Can't build a tree house here, and we can't sit and picnic and relax after a hard day of work. Not that I don't like bioswales, very useful, but they should be in addition to the urban forest, not as a replacement for the urban forest. So that's how we lose the budget battle for trees and green spaces. Whenever I hear the word, we need balance, I know that a tree somewhere is going to die. This is code for we're comparing this tree and on this land and another use for this land, and the other use is going to win. The trees really don't win. So I tried to put this into some words that people could understand why we always lose the budget battle for green. And I came up with this remarkable set of pithy sayings. The benefits of green spaces are multiple, ongoing, they accrue to the public, they're preventative, cross-jurisdictional, and cumulative. Now, doesn't that make everything clear? Well, maybe not. So we'll look at that a little closer. But the benefits of removing trees accrue to the individual. It's a one-time benefit, and it's a one benefit. And I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by these sentences. Some of you may remember in Seattle that some neighbors were caught having clear-cut a green belt for their private view. They cut down over 100 trees. They were caught. We're still waiting to see them prosecuted. But the reason they did that is for a one-time benefit for themselves. The increase in view meant that their houses are worth more, and that will be realized one time when they sell that house. So that's the benefits of getting rid of trees. The benefits of keeping trees in that green space go to the public, and they're multiple. So there's less chance that the house below will get flooded, have its basement flooded. When those trees were cut, you could expect to see more flooding occurring downhill. There will be less chance that the hill will slide and take out the road below. And the people that will have to fix that will be the Department of Engineering, and they'll have to spend money on that to clean it up and restore. There will be fewer wildlife species now that all those trees are gone. Whose concern that is, and the money that's spent on that, is a whole different jurisdiction. That would be the Department of Ecology, I believe, and that's state, that's not even city. And also the hillside of green trees adds to the value of the neighborhood in the city. When people come to Seattle and they want to decide if they're going to live here or move their business here, they look out and they see all this green, and all these green slopes add to the value of the city in a sort of a diffuse way, not a specific way. And then there's all the other benefits that are very small, but they're cumulative, which is to say the pollution that comes from down below, that would be the diesel trains and the industrial area just below. That air pollution is trapped in trees. It doesn't get to the neighborhoods nearby. The water that runs off the hillside absorbs into the hillside when there's trees there. It runs off and pollutes Puget Sound when they're not there. It's also a sink for carbon, and it also cools the whole city, so there's less energy used, things like that. And those are benefits to retaining trees, but they don't show up in anybody's budget. It's very hard to budget for prevention. If I'm, say, a Medic 1 response team, and I'm putting together my budget, I might ask for a new Medic response team vehicle so I can, get to these people that are having heat and stress-related health issues. But having trees would prevent that, a certain amount of that, and it's money that doesn't show up in my budget. So we continue to cut down the trees, and then we have to add, afterwards, we have to add the patch to fix the problems we created by removing tree cover. So in this scenario, it's cross-jurisdictional. The benefits are cross-jurisdictional. They show up in a lot of different people's budgets, not just one department. In Seattle, the only department that takes care of green spaces is the park department, and the value is amenity. It isn't these other values don't show up. And the benefits are ongoing. The hillside of trees creates benefit year after year after year, the same benefits year after year after year, whereas cutting down trees is a benefit for just one time, the time that the house is sold. And even though a lot of the benefits of retaining trees and green spaces are small per square foot, they add up. They're cumulative. So it all adds up. It's cumulative. By the time we realize that we're having big troubles related to not enough trees, it's too late. The land is already built on. Here, a lot of people think it can't happen here. Well, this is a slide of two neighborhoods just north of Seattle, and they're right next to each other. I sent up a fellow went up in a small airplane to take a picture of the Highlands and Innis Arden. And Innis Arden has almost no trees, and it looks like this slide. And the one on the left is the Highlands. It has a lot of trees and a lot of land. And you can imagine that Innis Arden is not a comfortable place to live because of the lack of trees and the cooling effects and the effects on the environment. So it can happen here. It happens when it's built into the law, built into the budget, and built into the comprehensive plan. So you have to take care that those things reflect the values of trees. and this is just review. I hope you understand what it means now when I say the benefits of green spaces are multiple. They're ongoing, not just 1 year, and they are benefit to the public, not to the private individual. Well, to both, actually. And it's also preventative. It stops things from happening that would cost us money. It's cross-jurisdictional. It goes through so many people's different budgets that it's never reflected. And that it's cumulative, which is to say, it all adds up. But the benefits of removing trees really accrue to individuals, and it's usually money, and it's usually private. So smart growth has changed the game. People who wanted to retain green spaces used to have the high moral ground because that was a benefit for the public, whereas cutting them down was a benefit for the individual. But now, because of the density smart growth philosophy, the removal of trees has become part of the moral high ground. And there's good reasons that we're embracing density. And I remember when we were tearing down the trees out in the wilderness, and the Growth Management Act came along, and it was written into law that we put most of the people in the cities so we could save the sprawl from eating up the country. It's a very good reason. But there are other promises that smart growth has made, this philosophy of land use. And it's very divisive. People will argue for and against these things. For example, some people say it saves the environment, the environment out there, but other people say that, if it's going to be so miserable, then people will move back to the suburbs if we don't include green space. The belief, the assertion is that it saves resources, and I'm sure it's true, by not building farther and farther out with sewer systems and roads and whatever else. We don't waste as many resources, but it does cause a burden on the resources, infrastructure resources inside the city of Seattle and the environment. Also, because we're not commuting, we're building densely, we're working where we live, then we're not wasting gas and causing global climate change because we're commuting. And a couple other things, that it reduced housing costs. Some people say that smart growth has caused the housing prices to go up. Other people say, well, it's because we don't have enough density, and if we add more, the housing prices will come down. So I'm not here to say what's true and what's not true with regards to density and smart growth. But I can tell you what keeping urban green in the picture will do. Fewer people will move away because, especially families that want some place for their kids to play, and like that. It also reduces the strain on infrastructure. It keeps Seattle desirable. It makes the large-scale buildings, whether they're, townhouses or giant skyscrapers or apartments for that matter, more acceptable to the public. And it retains our local environmental health and our personal health. Big or small, short or tall, I assert your buildings are going to need some green space. People prefer to live in little houses with a little bit of green around them. After that, they would prefer to live in shorter houses or a little bit taller, skinnier buildings. And after that, least favorite is the very tall buildings. But even if we could succeed in keeping all of our neighborhoods very short, flat buildings, if you don't have enough green around them, it isn't right. Here's a picture in the Philippines. This is all low buildings, but without enough green, it is an environmental and personal nightmare for people. This is the other option, which is all tall buildings, tall skyscrapers full of people, and it's pretty awful also if it doesn't have enough green around it, incorporated into the design. And as you will remember, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have tall buildings, short buildings. You can get all the housing you need by building up, not out, which is good inside the city as well as outside the city. I have a lot of various sort of fixes that people could put in to reverse the trend of losing green space in our highly developing city. I won't go over them all, but these are things that other cities have tried. We need to start really putting our minds to it. After we decide that we do need more green space and it is worthwhile, we need to unleash the forces of thinking and effort into doing so. Here's some more things that other people have tried. And still some more that we could try. Money is always the problem, and there's ways to get money. Other ideas to improve the amount of green we have is to actually start enforcing our ordinances and looking into workarounds. And people are always asking for the concrete ideas. Well, here they are. And finally, I want to go over how we lose paradise. What's the progression? We lose paradise and the environment in small increments, and many of them make perfect sense and have good reason to occur. But these little small losses add up to the destruction of the environment that we need. The immediate effects are so small that we tend to discount them and go ahead with our plans to cut into the environment. But once they have all been added up, you've got really big problems. An example would be global climate change. You know, the amount of gas I burn driving from here to there doesn't really add up to much with regards to global warming gases that cause global warming. But you add them all up, all the people around the world, and you have a serious problem that may not be fixable. We're getting to the point where it might not be able to be fixed. So even though this little piece that I'm responsible for doesn't amount to much, cumulative, it amounts to a great deal. And once it becomes broken, sometimes we can't fix it. And that's where we're headed in a lot of different areas. So what is losing the environment? When is the point of no return? When are you in trouble? What does that look like? And we all recognize this sort of thing where there's protests, big trees are coming down, people are protesting. There's a very sad shot of a tree being taken down. And that's what we think of. I included this one because it is so terribly sad. You'll see the one remaining tree of a whole large area of trees that were that size that people spent many days protesting and living in, trying to stop them from being taken down. And they've taken them all down, except this last one has one guy left in it. And it was all done for a stadium. Say, for example, somebody were to bequeath a very large paradise to you and your city, and it looked like this, and you were very happy with it. You might think that these few small additions were a good thing, and I would think they were a good thing, and I'd vote for them myself. We want a little restroom, we want a little trail, you know, maybe a visitor center so people can check in, and other small amenities to make paradise more enjoyable for people. And it goes along that way for a while, except that we keep budgeting. We don't budget to maintain paradise, and these things cost money to maintain. After a while, during some hard times, we stop maintaining paradise, and we get some, you know, nasty looking stuff, and people move in, and it's not so nice anymore. So we're struggling on how to make paradise pay for itself, and the answer is more use. We can charge user fees, or we'll have more people vote for more money for maintenance if more people are using it. And there's an entire argument, long-time argument in the environmental community about whether or not the green or the environment is only useful in as much as it can be used by people, or does it have intrinsic value? So we're going to get some more people to use it. We're going to add some things to invite more people in. We're going to have some camping and a couple of paved paths and mountain bike boardwalk and some concessions. And so we're building up a real constituency for paradise, and these people vote for maintenance. In the bad times, maybe we sell off a piece or two, but we make sure that it's an unused piece that isn't very visible. And we also add some more uses that everybody wants, everybody agrees on. We need a place for the kids to play, and usually a utility gets involved. I put in a pipeline or maybe solar panels that the community really, really needs, and there's no other place to put them. So it goes in the green space. Now we have this popular piece of land, and we want to make it even more accessible. So we're going to enlarge the road. We're going to make it so that people get more places in paradise, because access is the key. And then we have more uses and more people, bigger everything, bigger visitor center, more people. And if we're going to be equal about things, we're going to let in other kinds of uses, maybe uses that we don't all agree on, because we have to be just with our application of the use of green space. We're going to need a bigger parking lot. Now we have a lot of people using paradise. Paradise is only a finite acreage, but the number of people keeps increasing, and so does the use. Paradise has never been so popular. Now we're starting to get into a little trouble. In the beginning, there was some wildlife, and it was big wildlife, and it was very wild wildlife. It left pretty soon after people arrived because it just wasn't comfortable for them, or in other cases, they were actually made to go away. But there was a lot of other wildlife still kicking around, and people got to enjoy it, including the plants, the native plants. And after a while, some of those left because there was just too much activity, too much human activity. And when it really got bad was when the land started to suffer from the overuse by people. And some of the real pretty places got replaced with, washed out areas and overused areas and abused areas. And that can get to be quite significant when you get large groups of people with a finite amount of land. Paradise is in real trouble now. It doesn't look the same, doesn't feel the same. And we don't want to wind up with just this for our native flora and fauna. So we're going to have to struggle with these issues before this happens. In order to save paradise, these are the things I think need to happen. We have to have green values integrated into our budgeting system. All the compiled, the total of the values of green integrated into our accounting system. And something like that's happening in Seattle right now. It's called natural asset accounting, is being considered by the city council. Let's hope they do it. Trees, another possibility is, should trees have standing? You'll have to look that up on your Google. And also our planning documents need to include structures for fulfillment. We can have all these wonderful goals, but unless you have a way to incorporate them into your budgets, into your practices, into your policies, then they won't happen. And so you can't just have the plan, you have to have the metrics, and you have to have the manner by which your goals will be realized. In order for that to happen, you have to have some outreach that shows to people that trees and green spaces are not just pretty ornamental things that we can get rid of when we have more important things to do, that they are an important thing that must be incorporated from the beginning. And you do that with metrics. One of the metrics that we desperately need is a build out of Seattle. How much land is going to be left when we completely build it out, so we can plan backwards. How much land do we have to save now? And trees need to be supported cross-jurisdictionally. They can't just be the park department's business, because park is all about amenity and recreation, and trees and urban green spaces actually do a lot of good. They do public health good, they do environmental good, they do good for our city's infrastructure, saving money, all kinds of things that must be reflected, because we certainly don't want to wind up in a situation where there's no place for trees. And that's the end of the slideshow. So my name's Cass Turnbull. I'm with PlantAmnesty, PlantAmnesty.org. We're a voice for the green spaces, the urban green spaces in Seattle and around the world. We're hoping that this will help you figure out what the impediments are to getting that green space. We really need it. We need it economically for the economic health of our city. We need it for our personal health. We need it for the health of the environment and even the health of the planet. It's all interrelated, and together we can make it happen. Thanks for watching.